Well, I contested that video that YouTube claimed. What it was is that I was telling people about spike proteins and how the vaccine doesn't really have the RNA with it. That it isn't the full virus that you get; that you're just getting the spike proteins, and that's what defines whether or not that's what your immune system is looking at to determine um, if you've got the virus. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to train the immune system to recognize the virus, and how they usually do that is by putting in a compromised virus into your into your system, and the immune system gets this compromised virus which can't do anything or can't develop, and just so that it can recognize what a foreign body, one of the foreign bodies that it might. It's kind of like here's the guy we've caught this criminal and here's what he looks like, and then the body says, well, certainly this is not anybody that we know, and we'll be sure to look out for him the next time he comes around. Of course, it's a clone of him because we never experienced clones, and this virus is the same structure every time, and so it's kind of just giving it the immune system, because the immune system tries to keep out of your body all the stuff that's foreign, and this so all you have to do is just give it foreign stuff, and it will I don't know, I think what it does is it develops some special organisms that will go through and filter it out, and so what they do is these cells come in, take it, and expel it, or I mean they take it, cover it, and it gets expelled from the system. And the difference here is that you're not getting the virus, you're getting only the spike proteins. And that's what I've been told. And um, if you are, if you don't believe it is the truth, I suggest going and checking with two or three or four other uh, entities or people that understand what is actually being done with the particular vaccine you got. But assuming that it's like the way vaccines are done before, would be, would be that they would, you know, that they're grown or something inside of eggs, inside of the yolk of eggs or whatever, which is the way they did. They do flu vaccine. They didn't do it that way this time. This one time they did something more creative, and people assume that this vaccine is created the same way the flu vaccine is, and you can get sick from it, like the flu vaccine. But the difference here is that it's not the same kind of vaccine. It's a different kind of vaccine, and that all they're trying to do is to get the immune system to recognize the virus. Now, YouTube might also flag this video because they have bots that go around and listen to people's videos. And if I get a message that comes through and says this is against our community guidelines, I'll say, well, you don't believe in free speech, obviously, and you shouldn't even be in America, and you should not flag me for this stuff content, because I know you don't have the staff to listen to every single video that comes into your premises, that there are hundreds of thousands, even millions of people that are putting videos up on your service. And some people can't fathom how they're able to store so much information. It's fairly easy. Storage is so cheap today. I give you an example. The 1 terabyte iPhones that you got, you can store 3 pages of information about 333 million people, which is everybody in America. So you could have 3 pages of information on every person in America inside of a modern iPhone, have it completely disconnected from the telephone system. You could have it completely self-contained, and you could be a spy, and you could put facial information in it so you could recognize people, know their past, all the people who are related to them and their pasts, put that all into 1 terabyte phone. And the CIA must know this, and they must know that if you completely took it off the network, it would give everybody in America the potential to be a spy. And that's one of my suggestions for doing away with the Chinese government and possibly the Russian government and it could be the way of pretty much doing away with all governments, is to have disconnected 1 terabyte phones, uh, that their operating system is completely replaced with something that doesn't permit the communication system to work. So there's no way they can eavesdrop or anything, or that the cell phone, you could even have the antennas and stuff removed. All that's important is the processor, the display screen, the input buttons, and the memory. The memory is the most important part. But you have an interface to that memory, and then you can store the entire database inside of that memory. And that's just a 1 terabyte phone, and the memory for a terabyte is about $100-$200. You can imagine a company like YouTube or Google being able to buy, tens of thousands of those drives, and now they have the capacity to store all the video that most people would ever store on their YouTube site. And then you have people like me that just store gobs and gobs of video. And the cost to me is the same as the cost to your grandparents, is that it's distributed over the people that use too much and also the people that don't use a whole lot. And I'm just one of those that's out of the ordinary. And I'm pushing a format that YouTube wants people to push. But there's not enough cameras out there to really push this format. So I am kind of the guinea pig for the VR 180 format. It's attracting people because people want stereo VR experiences, but their bots don't know that. And when YouTube goes around looking at content and they find something, they flag me for it, they risk the potential of losing a kind of content type that they're trying to push. And I'm sure that they probably looked at it and they said, we really don't want to kick this guy out. But that's my assumption, is that they would care about that, but I don't know, they might not care at all. The funny thing is that they send people to my YouTube channel, and not even I can figure out why, and nobody else can figure out why they are sent to my channel. I have no clue. The only thing I can imagine is that VR 180 video content is given a higher priority, because Google's been trying to push the Google Cardboard 3D content. They were instrumental in trying to get VR 180 and VR 360 video formats to the forefront. And so they're probably just begging for people to stick VR 180 content out there to exploit this video format. And nobody has the cameras. Hardly anybody has cameras to do it, because when the cameras were put out, people were kind of not really in the know, and they really kind of screwed it up early on because they were trying to get people to experience the VR content by using their cell phones. And when people were exposed to it, they were not impressed, and it ruined the perception of what VR could be. And Oculus is a better representation of that, and it's achieved what Google and YouTube wanted to do, but they just assumed that people would get it if they got the Google Cardboard, that they would get what the potential was for VR 180. It's just that they thought, if they could get it in the door, that it would sell itself, but it didn't. It's just like the Macintosh. When the Macintosh hit the masses, Steve Jobs just instantly assumed everybody would get Macintoshes, and it was not the case. The Macintosh didn't sell very well because it didn't have any software coming out the door. It took about a year or two before the developers picked up the Macintosh and started developing software for it. But because of his assumption that it was going to sell really well, he tried to force Apple to stop selling the Apple computer. And Wozniak was on the other end of that because that was his baby that Jobs was trying to push out the door. I mean, trying to throw out with the bathwater, the baby that he was trying to throw out with bathwater. And eventually, John Scully was advised by the employees, because they could not deal with Jobs, to have him fired. And that's what they did. They kicked him right out. He still had his stock, but he was no longer working for the company because he was so annoying and he was trying to get his way. And he was kind of like not really facing up to the fact that the stuff he brought to the forefront was just not very well thought out how it was to be unveiled. It was pushed out the door as quickly as possible. He got a group of about seven developers to work on creating the Macintosh, and it was kind of a do or die type thing. Do it in a year, and let's get it out the door. And some of the things that they did that was kind of freaky was the floppy drives stored data the way that a record stores music, and that is that the density of the tracks is dependent upon where the stylus is. Modern drives don't work that way. What they do is they separate the data up into sets of into equal radial. They use radial was it degrees. They use that to determine what track, what block you're on. But the floppy drives would use a variable locator for and that was the reason why you couldn't take the floppy from a Macintosh and read it on a PC, because both handled where the blocks were stored, the blocks of information were stored on the floppy differently. And so you had to have programs on the PCs that would that could read that information. They just couldn't write it that way, and so or something like that. And I remember getting that you could get software to read stuff from a PC to an Amiga, which had a different way of storing things on the floppy as well, and from the Macintosh to the Amiga and vice versa. And the Amigas had special hardware you could stick in the Amiga 2000s that would put a PC on a board so that you could have a PC and an Amiga in the same computer. But what it was really was a PC motherboard in a card slot on the Amiga. And they also had something similar. Well, they didn't have something for the Macintosh because the Macintosh's operating system and motherboard design were all proprietary, patented technology by Apple. And so the only way you could ever have a Macintosh on Amiga was by having something that was similar to the Macintosh. I don't fully remember how they did it, and I think it was the same thing. It was like a motherboard that Apple had created, and they put it inside the Amiga, and you could have an Amiga and a Macintosh. I remember there was something like that you could do, but people wanted to conserve space on their desk, and so they tried to figure out ways to put all the necessary components in the same computer. The PowerPC, the idea behind that was it was a merging of the technology of IBM and Motorola, and so the Intel processor and the Motorola processor they created something called the PowerPC, and what it was is it was a reduced instruction set RISC processor. The idea behind RISC processors, a CISC processor, is what your normal Intel processor is, and your old Motorola. They're called CISC, and it means complex instruction set computers. And what they are is that for most of the chip, there is bunches of logic um, uh, just for doing various sorts of processes. You have a limited number of registers, and then you have all these operations. So it's like a multifunction scientific calculator. All these operations that you could use for all sorts of mathematical problems. And the reality is that not most programs never use all those functions. So what they do in a RISC processor is they water all of the operations necessary to do anything. It's kind of how Dennis Ritchie said your programs. C was designed in such a way, the C programming language, which is something different. The C programming language, any programming language should be able to all the stuff, and some of the stuff, it says you should do most of the stuff well, and the stuff that you can't do, it should at least be able to do. And so it's like you do all this 70% of the stuff well, and 30% should be possible. And that's what RISC processors do, is they move memory and they do logic operations, and then some of the operations that are run that people execute a lot are what are called streamlined. They're pipelined and parallelized, and it's fairly easy to parallelize operations inside of a processor. What you do is you take all the instructions and you lay them out like an assembly line, and the information goes down through this logic, and it's like it can do all the operations necessary to do things like divisions in one clock cycle.